If there's one thing that Doctor Who fans are, it's collectors. Whether that's Blu-rays, books, action figures or audio dramas, we can't help but buy everything that gets released from the show. And if there's one thing that targets the collector mindset more than any other, it's trading cards. Doctor Who trading cards have a long history dating back to the very beginnings of the show. So welcome to the other Virginity Corner, and this, a brief history of Doctor Who trading cards. Trading cards originated towards the end of the 19th century. What were initially playing cards used as strengtheners in cigarette packets evolved into printed cards bearing images deemed to be of interest to smoking men. The cards, often organised into sets, usually of around 50 or so cards, acted as a marketing gimmick to entice people to keep buying more packets of cigarettes. You know, just as a bonus on top of the nicotine. It wouldn't be too long before these cards caught the attention of an eager audience of children, who were also enticed by building up a collection of printed cards, and as such, the trade card phenomenon spread to other products like tea and sweets. These early cards, especially the ones aimed at a more male or child audience, those included with cigarettes and sweets, bear a striking resemblance to what remains today. Cards bearing sports and film iconography, as well as military iconography, though this is less common now. This is as opposed to products like tea, which typically bore more floral and royal images, with the marketing of the time aiming products like this at an audience of housewives. So, when Doctor Who arrived on the scene and was a near immediate hit in 1963, it only made sense that it would get its own trade card tie-in. And with Dalek mania sweeping the nation, it only became more of a certainty. So in 1964, our trading card journey begins, with Doctor Who and the Daleks cards coming in packets of Cadet Candy cigarettes. Doctor Who and the Daleks was a 50-card set, with one card per box of 10 sweet cigarettes. At this point in time, Dalek Mania was huge, and with Terry Nation owning the rights, he licensed them out to Jerry Anderson comic TV Century 21 in 1965 for a back-page Dalek strip, as well as a series of annuals starting in 1964. This strip was incredibly influential in terms of the direction that the Daleks would end up taking, with a lot of the iconic iconography of the Daleks coming from these pages. Even in the modern day, they still hold influence, with Stephen Moffat and Peter Capaldi referencing them in the behind-the-scenes material for The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. These strips were initially drawn, and beautifully so, by Richard Jennings, who, just 1 year earlier, provided the artwork for these cards. They really are gorgeously done, with some absolutely stunning bits of art that I'm happy to even own 2 of. The Doctor, or Doctor Who as he is exclusively referred to on the back of the cards, doesn't resemble Hartnell, but that doesn't really matter. You may ask where it fits into canon? Because this is Doctor Who, and everything is canon. And, he's a pre-Hartnell timeless Doctor, fuck it. And yes, these cards do tell an original story. As an incentive to collect all 50 cards, the back of each card features a small slice of text that, when strung together, creates a story. As such, these cards essentially act as individual comic panels that you collect as you go. The story takes 2 of Terry Nation's creations, the Daleks and the Vord, and pits them against each other, featuring exciting space battles and terrifying monsters. It's not at all well written, from an incoherent story to egregious grammatical errors that make a lot of the writing quite difficult to read in places. More often than not, articles like "the" are just entirely missing, which give the writing style a broken quality. That being said, the issues in the writing are largely due to the fact that there's just not that much text space on the back of these cards. The cards are aimed at a young audience, so it can't be too complicated. The cards do read like a child's picture book, and that's perfectly fine, though why some of the more egregious grammatical issues are there, I couldn't tell you. There is a level of brokenness to a lot of the writing, where it just feels like a lot of the words are missing. The story it sure is. From the Doctor watching in admiration of Dalek suicide bombers, to the Dalek banquet at the end, to the Doctor being human, it all just feels a bit off somehow. But the story doesn't especially matter here. All that matters is that incredible Richard Jennings art, and I imagine that most kids from back in 1964 didn't care about the story really, and just hoped they'd get a cool card with a Dalek or an explosion in it. And same, because these cards are beautiful, and I'm so happy I got some cool ones. And this story segment method would carry forward into the next card release, that being 1967's Doctor Who's Space Adventure, released in packs of Walls Skyray Ice Lollies. These were a 36 card set, and let's cut right to the chase here. These cards canonize rocket ice lollies as actual spaceships in the Doctor Who universe. These feature art by Pat Williams, who also did some Dalek strip art for the TV Comic Holiday Specials and TV Comic Annual. Not to be confused with TV Century 21, these are separate publications with separate Dalek strips. The art here is dynamic, fun, and colourful, but I'm overall less impressed by Williams' art here as I was by Richard Jennings' art for the last set. They also couldn't get Troughton's likeness right, so we have yet another timeless Doctor in the fray. I'm also surprised that Williams doesn't appear to have contributed any art for TV Century 21 at any point, because this is absolutely Thunderbird 3. I guess it goes to show quite how in the zeitgeist Thunderbirds was at this point in time. The cards themselves still contain snippets of the story on the reverse, though in a much smaller font than its predecessor, allowing for a wordier story to be told. There was also a companion book that you could stick the cards in that told the full story. This had the added benefit of meaning the story could still be read with the cards put into the album. The writing is just far superior to the previous release, with the art itself being less of a focus and more providing illustration for the story. I do quickly want to bring up one little thing in relation to the story, which is the naming. It wouldn't be until Peter Davison's run that the Doctor was credited as such, with the credits for the first 4 Doctor's eras calling them Doctor Who. As such, despite the show itself never really calling him Doctor Who on screen, the Doctor was culturally just known as Doctor Who. From interviewers calling the character Doctor Who, to the Cushing films, to these early card sets with the cadet set using the abbreviated Doctor and the Skyray using the full word. To fans who only refer to the Doctor as the Doctor, this can be frustrating, but that's just the era. It would take us a hot sec for this not to be the case. And surprisingly, we do have a surviving cinema advert for the Ice Lolly starring an actor by the name of Jerry Grant as the Doctor. So, to end the segment, I'll just play that now.
Will Doctor Who skate this time? Buy Wool's new shape Skyray with double flavors of raspberry and orange. And you get a free color picture card, one of a series showing Doctor Who and the Space Raiders battling with Daleks. Free when you buy Wool's new shape Skyray. Only 6 months.
We jump forward 9 years now to 1976, where a set of Doctor Who cards came free with packs of Thai Fu tea. These are the first cards to be based around actual photos from the show, rather than original art, and I do think that's a shame. There was something nice about having the unique art for each and every card, but I can see how that simply isn't all that viable for free cards coming with boxes of tea. There are 12 cards to collect in this set, with 1 card coming in every 36-bag box of Thai Fu tea. The pictures chosen are a mixed bag. I'm not entirely sure why the card for the Doctor is the only landscape picture chosen, why such a poor photo of an Ice Warrior was picked, or why this Cyberman is in profile. The cards are cut in an octagonal, space-age shape that gives them a decent deal of interest compared to a blander rectangular shape, though that's really the only interesting thing you can say about them. The backs aren't anything to write home about either, lacking any blurb about the characters, instead advertising the tie-in book of collated pre-existing stories that you could get via post order for £1. I don't know, I'm happy to have these relics of the past that are in such genuinely great condition, but they're just not all that exciting compared to the ones that have art on them. In 1975 and 1977, there were also Weetabix Doctor Who tie-ins, but I don't really count these as trading cards, as they're just stand-up game pieces made out of card. But regardless, I do think it's worth mentioning, and here's the ad for them.
Attention all Daleks, look for these special Doctor Who packs of Weetabix. Each one has one of these 4 Doctor Who action games, 3 of these stand-up figures, and a secret message from the Time Lords. We must capture these special packs of Weetabix and exterminate.
Collect the special Doctor Who Weetabix packs and enjoy your daily wheat, while stocks last.
Exterminate!
We jump forward another 17 years now to 1993 to a set of collector's cards released by CCC Limited to celebrate the show's 30th anniversary. I have no idea where these come from or how they were released. I have searched and searched and I can't even find any real information about the company that released them. All I do know is that the card set is made up of 20 cards featuring lovely art depicting all 7 Doctors at this point in time, an assortment of monsters, as well as a couple of allies for good measure. The Doctor cards were re-released free with issue 208 of Doctor Who magazine, featuring a 30th anniversary banner on the header and a promotional card message on the back. I wish I knew who did the art for these, because it's lovely work. There's a signature visible on some of them, but I can't make out a name, so if anyone knows anything about the artist responsible, please let me know. The only card I'm a bit unsure of is the Dalek one, the first in the set. Why is the Dalek angled slightly away from the viewer instead of more front on? It seems like a weird choice in angle, and I think it would look better facing the viewer. The choice in Dalek is good though. I always loved these white and gold beauties. That being said, the inclusion of the Solar Energy Collection disc is an anachronism and doesn't feature on the Imperial Daleks of Revelation and Remembrance of the Daleks. I'm not entirely sure how the 60s detail from precisely one story made it onto this 80s Dalek, but there you go. 1 year later, and Cornerstone Communications would release the first series of their Doctor Who trading card range. Between 1994 and 1996, Cornerstone Communications released 4 series of trading cards based on the entirety of the classic era. These cards are the first proper screenshot cards, being both a mix of promotional images shot for the show as well as screen grabs from the episodes themselves. The cards are split into a few different categories, predominantly adventure cards, those being screenshots from specific stories, Doctor cards featuring images of the Doctors, companion cards featuring the companions, villain cards featuring the villains, and legend cards featuring factoids from behind the scenes of the show. I own the entire 110 card base set of Series 1 of the range, and it's a weird mix. The stories featured go chronologically, but this first series misses out on An Unearthly Child, as well as other revered classics like Genesis of the Daleks that you might have expected them to put in an introductory wave of a card series, whilst major regeneration and Doctor introduction stories like Logopolis or Spearhead from Space are missing. K9 and Company is present, however. In the Doctor category, the first Doctor only has 2 cards, one of which being Richard Handel, whilst the third and fourth Doctor have 3. Poor Colin Baker only gets 1 card in this first series, which I guess goes to show quite how unpopular he was at the time. Thank God he has got reappraised and found more popularity as the years have gone on. Meanwhile, in the companion realm, Susan and Barbara are missing from the initial TARDIS team, as is fan favourite Sarah Jane. On the other hand, Benton is here. And to be clear, I couldn't call myself a Doctor Who fan if I didn't love me some Benton, but why is he included in this first series over some more popular characters? Of course, the Daleks get 5 cards in this wave, which would be a trend going forward through the waves. It's giving B&M Dalek sets. There are only so many images of Daleks you can use. I really like some of the images chosen for these, with shots like this photo of the Toymaker being really striking and just good choices. Of course, my complaints about pics for characters and stories are all rectified as later series fill out the roster, but that this is your first series and so many iconic things are missing just feels a bit weird. What I don't have from this set of cards are any of the Prism Enhanced Doctor cards or any of the autograph cards, which are a staple of the screenshot card genre. These feature autographs from key cast members from the show and are one of the main draws to this range of cards, and are something we will see a good deal more of going forward. One weird thing to notice on these cards is that the diamond Doctor Who logo in the upper left-hand corner is often misprinted, with the various colours being slightly offset from each other, with the worst offender in these cards I own being this card for the Master. Now we switch tracks to something more interactive with 1996's Doctor Who the Collectable Trading Card Game. Published in 1996 by the Multimedia Group, the Collectable Trading Card Game was a card game devised by Paul Vile and Eamon Bloomfield. The cards feature various screenshots or promotional stills from episodes throughout the years, bordered by a coloured texture denoting the card's time zone. The cards also feature various rules and stats for each card that affect the play of a turn. I would read you the rules, or even attempt to understand this game, but this rulebook is 27 pages long, which is just absurd. Wikipedia says that the second edition of the Scry Collectible card game checklist and price guide. Look, I've already spent far too much on this video to justify spending this much money to find one sentence about a game that I already don't really care about. Says that this game is like playing 3 games of Magic the Gathering at once. That's fucked. We'll get there in a hot sec. I know that complex card games are some people's bag, but it's just not something that my brain can quite comprehend. There were 300 different cards to collect in this set, with the starter set coming with 60 randomly selected cards. It's this starter set that I have. In a testament to quite how random this selection is, I don't even have a doctor. I'm not the biggest fan of the art style here. It's very of the time, with garish basic CGI blobs and shapes that look like Windows Media Player screenshots. It's interesting to already be seeing some reuse of images between sets, with this image of a Cyberman's head exploding from the bazooka card also having been used in the Cornerstone set. I really do wish I cared about this. I like that the game element gives the cards something of a point as a collection, but it's just too complex for me to be able to invest any real time into trying to understand it. Especially as it's nearly 30 years old. Even if I did learn how to play it, there's no one to play it against. No one is playing this forgotten card game from 1996. And now we hit the new millennium, with the Strictly Ink trading cards releasing from 2000 to 2008. These cards were released in at least 11 different waves and ranges, all of which following the same format, with the bulk of the cards being screenshots from various stories, much like the Cornerstone series. Unlike the Cornerstone series though, these cards went in chronological order, meaning no stories felt like they were erroneously missing along the way. Much like the Cornerstone series, I also own the full 120 card base set from the first series, with the episodic cards covering the complete first and second Doctor's eras from An Unearthly Child through to the War Games. The other cards then cover the Doctors, Companions, and Villains, much like the prior Cornerstone series also did. Because this was the first wave of cards to release after the TV movie's release, we also get cards covering that production. The logo from the movie also features, being the logo used across the range, as the merchandise style guide of the time had replaced the diamond logo that was standard prior to the release of this series. Because I have to nitpick, the images chosen for these cards are often a little weird, such as An Unearthly Child not featuring Susan, or this 5th Doctor card, one of only 2 in the first series, just being a blur. That being said, there are some lovely images used across the series. I especially love this image of John Pertwee and Elizabeth Sladen. It just contains so much joy. The autograph cards also make a return for this series, but once again, I don't have any, but they do exist, honest. Despite these ones being the longest lasting card range, I just don't have all that much to say. The screenshot cards just end up being a bit repetitive, which is fine, but I would like something a bit more engaging. And now we come to the big one, the reason that this video exists. Doctor Who Battles in Time, released by G.E. Fabry between 2006 and 2009. And on a slight tangent, I'd like to tell you a story, because I didn't start watching Doctor Who in 2005 with Series 1. It took me until Series 3 in 2007 to actually watch the show, and that was because of Battles in Time. At the time, Battles in Time was one of the big trading card games going around my school, and wanting to know what all the fuss was about, I weaseled my way into watching Doctor Who. And as you may be able to tell, I immediately fell in love with the show, and for quite a few years there became the only thing I cared about, and is still a major part of who I am. And a big part of my fandom at that young age was Battles in Time. I don't have any cards remaining from my childhood, but I did used to have a bag chock full of them. A core memory of mine is using my limited pocket money at the time to go down to my local newsagents and pick up 2 packets of Invader cards, finding my only ultra rare at the time, Carrier Knight Transformation, alongside 2 of the rare Master cards. It's fair to say that without Battles in Time, my connection to Doctor Who would be incredibly different to what it is today. So there's a lot of nostalgia at play for me around these cards, and I'm not the only one that feels this. But what is it about them that creates such a draw, and are they really all that special? Battles in Time released at a point in time when Doctor Who was at its peak. Voyage of the Damned would release to the highest viewing figures in the show's history, ignoring City of Death Parts 4 and 3, Destiny of the Daleks Part 4, City of Death Part 2, Destiny of the Daleks Part 3, The Ark in Space Part 2, the web planet, and dimensions in time. Doctor Who was everywhere. It plastered the walls of toy shops, it had yogurts and spin offs. It was a cultural juggernaut. And amongst this, 3 different Doctor Who magazines ran simultaneously. The main Doctor Who magazine, the only one still running, Doctor Who Adventures, and Doctor Who Battles in Time. The last magazine was the tie-in magazine for the card game of the same name, containing game rules, original comics, cards, and free with issues 2 and 3, a TARDIS card carrying case. The series initially released as a limited test set in the south of England, which saw pretty immediate success. So, with some slight alteration to the card design, the magazine and card collection went national, backed by a £1 million advertising campaign.
It's here. Doctor Who Battles in Time. With every issue you get a pack of stunning trading cards. There's an out-of-this-world TARDIS collector's case to store them. A magazine full of secret information and extra cards at your newsagent. Doctor Who Battles in Time.
Battles in Time would wide release in September of 2006, with the Exterminator set covering all of Series 1 and 2 over 275 cards. This would swiftly be followed by Annihilator in February of 2007, including characters from The Runaway Bride, Invader in September of 2007, covering Series 3, Ultimate Monsters in March of 2008, covering monsters from both Classic and New Who, as well as Voyage of the Damned, and Devastator in September of 2008, covering Series 4. By the end of the run, there were 1,075 cards in the main set, with some further cards in the Daleks v Cybermen and Adventurous special sets that are numbered separately from the main range. The cards are essentially Top Trumps cards in style, featuring a range of stats that can be compared to see who wins in any given encounter. One of the most basic game modes goes as such. Each player gets a deck of 20 cards, dealing themselves 5 and leaving the rest face down as a draw pile. The first player looks at the cards in their hand and picks out a category they're strongest in, calling out their green score. If none of the opponent's cards feature a green score that can beat the first player, then they must choose to discard a card. The winning player's card goes to the bottom of the draw deck, the loser's to the side, out of play. Both players draw a card from the draw deck, with the winner of the previous round being the one to choose the category. The gameplay is then repeated until one player has lost all their cards. I don't think I was ever the kind of person to actually play the games themselves. I just liked to collect the cards, with that hankering returning just a couple of years ago. And as it turns out, it's surprisingly easy to find sealed boxes of Invader and Ultimate Monsters cards out there, which is fun and really sparked the nostalgia bones for me. The packets all contain 9 cards, usually 8 commons and 1 foiled rare. Also available were super rares in a few different styles, with 1 in every 6 packs, and the lenticular ultra rare with 1 in every 24 packs. And the white whale of the Battles in Time collector's deck is the Super Rose card, with only 1 in every 1000 packs. This card was present throughout all 5 main decks, though would go through some minor alterations from deck to deck. Battles in Time did incredibly well at the time, and still lives on in the minds of Doctor Who fans today, from Twitter accounts like @LaurieDesign imagining what Battles in Time cards would look like now if the cards continued to be released, to people like me who, now having adult money, turn to eBay to fulfill their childhood collector's dreams.
I'm James, so I currently run one of the Battles in Time accounts, and I believe I've got the most extensive collection of Battles in Time probably in the world, and therefore, because of that, I like to say I'm the leading expert in it. As soon as the first episode came out, I was obsessed with Doctor Who. It was just one of those things. I remember watching it in the living room as a family. Oh yeah, I remember this as a kid, watching it and getting into it. And then Battles in Time came out. I was in the test area, so I got it a little bit early. And Dad, he bought me the test set issue 1. With the good old binder and everything like that, and I was hooked literally from that day on. And I did stop as I got a bit older because it was seen uncool as it was. I was one of those ones that wanted to fit in, but as I've got older and I'm getting back into it, I don't care. I loved it, and so I'm getting back into it now. I don't care what anyone would think about it, and I do regret leaving it if I admit it. Because I really love that series, and it was Dad and I bonded with it as well, like properly. because he would come home with them, he'd get them delivered to work, all that kind of thing. So yeah, quite an in-depth history background for me, but it's basically just from childhood.
So what made you come back to collecting Battles in Time as an adult then?
We were doing a clear out not too long ago. Well, I say not too long, but 3 years ago when I first started collecting again. And it was in a tub just full of the old magazines, and I was like, oh, it's just that nostalgia feeling. I remembered how much I enjoyed collecting it. And I opened some albums, and inside one of the albums was 2 test set Super Roses, which, if you know Battles in Time, they're worth a lot of money. It's there was a Battles in Time sort of group where Harrison was originally in as well, and I remember going, what are these rare? They're different to the thing. I think they're the test set ones, and they went, yeah, they are, and they just went, how have you got 2? Hang on a minute. It's one of the, I was completely unaware, but. And then because of that, they were telling me that there's different variations and stuff like that. So I was a complete novice at this. I didn't know as much as I do now. And I sort of weirdly surpassed the information.
What do you think it was about Battles in Time that specifically drew people in where other Doctor Who trading cards didn't as much, and why has it stuck around as much as it has?
I think for Battles in Time, I think they timed it perfectly. I remember Series 1. It was only towards the end of it where it really got popularity, because the first episode, Rose, that did get obviously enough to warrant a second series, etc. But I think it was more at that point it was more adults at the time that go, I remember that from when I was a kid. Let's start. And they got their kids to watch it with them. And then as it went on, the kids started to watch it. Come Series 2 with David Tennant. That was, I think I can speak for most people, except for me. Mine's always going to be the 9th, but that was most people's favourite Doctor. That was when it was like relatable, all that. And I think that's when Battles in Time knocked it on the head by going, we're going to release it now. They released it midway through that. And it was, so not only was it the time, but it was also the quality of them. So yes, they did their test run to see how well it would sell. But come the main set, they kept their quality. It was, at least for me, it was the first I could remember. It was one of those where I hadn't had it before, where it was something to collect. So you would be going, oh, I need, I don't know, 132 and 137. So that brought in the social aspect. So a lot of kids at school would go, oh, I've got that one. So you'd swap them. And it sort of became, which I think helped it, a community in a way, especially in the schools, or at least I remember. You would swap it and play the games as well. And you'd be the most popular kid in school if you ripped open a Super Rose or an Ultra Rare, those kind of things, where that it just all come together at those right points, I think. And that's why it, for me, that was so popular and it stood the test of time, because they actually put in the quality there.
So thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this.
That's all right.
And thank you so much for, your website and your Instagram account and all of that, because it has been a real help in producing this video.
Thank. At least someone's reading it, at least.
Yeah. even just stuff like archiving the adverts and stuff like that. I'm gonna stick one of those in there, and just all of that. It's just been such a help, so thank you so much for that.
But is it really just the Battles in Time released at the series' peak that it stuck around in the public consciousness? In all honesty, yeah, it probably is mostly that. However, I do think that the graphic design work done on these cards is just a lot more appealing than the card sets that would follow from other publishers. Obviously, it's mostly just screenshots from episodes with some kind of background slapped behind it, but there is just something indescribably engaging and interesting about the way these cards look, as opposed to... Alien Armies was a one-series trading card set released in 2009 by Panini, and I just do not care for these. I really like the nice curved corners of the Battles in Time cards. These just have sharp corners. It's an absolute nitpick, but it's something that annoyed me as a kid. The graphic design here is just a lot more boring than the Battles in Time cards. Again, I don't really know what's missing here, but it's just not grabbing me. I can see what they're going for with their graphic design, but it's just not for me. It's also a shame that there's only 6 cards per pack, though the price of 50p as opposed to Battles and Time's 150 for 9 cards does make Alien Armies a pretty good option for collecting Doctor Who cards on a budget at the time. That being said, if you only get 1 pack at a time, which I imagine was the case for many kids, there's obviously only 2/3 of the amount of cards in there per pack, so it's less exciting to open and collect. And collecting them all requires a hell of a lot more packs as a result. With 260 cards, a similar amount to the 250 most Battles and Time waves had. These cards, only really being available for around 3 months, are surprisingly difficult to get a hold of, and I was only able to get 1 pack at a price I could stomach, so obviously my opinion is based predominantly on only these 6 cards, rather than having a more comprehensive set. That being said, these just didn't do it for me. This also didn't have the tie-in magazine that Battles and Time did, and that was probably a good part of the reason why this release never really caught on with the public at large. The BBC clearly took this to heart with their next release, however. Monster Invasion, released in 2011 by BBC Enterprises, was closer to the mark for me. These cards are a lot closer to Battles and Time in style, with the magazine even copying the format of the magazine release, with a binder free with issue 1 and a TARDIS carrying case free with issues 2 and 3. I have this case somewhere at home, and it's great. I still think the graphic design just isn't all there, but I am happy that the Moffat era got their own version of Battles in Time, even if it couldn't live up to the greatness that was that set. I do like the quotes at the bottom of the character cards, replacing the blurbs from the Battles in Time cards. That being said, for some of these characters, they really are stretching for quotes. There were 3 different waves to collect, with the third one only being available with the magazine rather than packs being available separately in newsagents. These add up to a total of 471 cards over the 3 waves, with the cards returning to the 9 card per pack quantity of the Battles in Time cards, also returning to the £1.50 price point. A big selling point was the augmented reality cards, which felt all the rage back in 2011, with some of the cards having a code you could input on the associated website that could, with the aid of a webcam, make it seem like you were holding a little CG model of whatever the card represented on top of the card. It wasn't amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fun enough. In 2013, to coincide with the release of Series 7B, there was another license shakeup, as Topps got the license to release Alien Attax, a 2-wave card set based on their Match Attax line of football cards. These first wave of cards, being based on Match Attax cards, strip the complexity right back, only featuring the 2 stats to play with, those being attack and defense. It does mean that the gameplay is easier, but it has the side effect that they're just less interesting, and gameplay ends up being more repetitive than it already is. The 50th anniversary wave, released later in 2013, adds more stats into the mix, with stats more akin to the previous card games, though attack and defense are still the focus. That original wave had 240 cards to collect, with the 50th anniversary having a further 160, bringing the overall total to 400 cards. Like Battles in Time and Monster Invasion, these packs contain 9 cards apiece, retailing for £1 a pack, with a booster pack containing 5 packets plus an exclusive Weeping Angel card also being released, and is the format I managed to buy these cards in. I still don't like the graphic design of these. I just don't think the Match Attack style really works for Doctor Who, and it doesn't grab me, which is a shame. I also think basing your range of Doctor Who cards on a line of football cards just doesn't really make sense from a marketing perspective, as I just don't imagine there's much crossover there. The 50th anniversary wave, as an extra collectible incentive, also featured rarer cards that contained swatches of fabric from characters' costumes, which is cool. Between 2015 and 2018, Topps also released various sets of cards exclusive to the US. I don't have any of these, but I'll briefly run through them now. These cards all follow the Cornerstone and Strictly Ink format of predominantly just being screenshot cards with no gameplay aspect. Much like those previous releases, these are also split into various categories, from story-related cards to character cards to autograph cards. The first, released in 2015, was simply called Doctor Who Trading Cards, and had 200 cards in the base set, with cards covering the entire history of the show. This wave also had autograph cards and costume piece cards to collect. The second was Timeless, released in 2016. It also covered the show's entire history. There were 155 base cards to collect, with a heck of a lot more autograph, costume, and other collectible cards to collect on top. Extraterrestrial Encounters was released in late 2016 and was much the same as the previous two waves, featuring 100 cards in the base set plus more of the same costume and other collectible cards as the others. The 10th Doctor Adventures card series was released at the very end of 2016, and wouldn't you know, was based on the 10th Doctor. These cards followed Topps Star Wars Wide Vision card releases and were long. That's their selling point. These cards are less of a proper trading card collection, being released in a single TARDIS box retailing for $100, featuring 88 base cards and a further 2 autograph cards. The autograph cards are the collectible bit, with 38 signatures available with varying rarities. And finally, the Signature Series, released in 2017, is primarily focused around the autograph cards, though there are 100 cards in the base deck that aren't signed. I'll be honest, I don't really care about autograph cards, so none of these sets, especially not this set, especially appeal to me. What's less of interest to me, though, is the next item on this list. Worlds Apart is a line of Doctor Who NFTs released in 2020 by Reality Gaming Group. I say released, but these are NFTs, so it's gotta be complicated, so 3 years later, these are still in pre-sale. These rightfully crashed and burned, and since the NFT market has pretty much entirely disintegrated, these will likely never see a proper release, and thank God for that. Bad, no good, ooh. Next, the Series 11 and 12 and Series 1 to 4 card collections released in 2022 and 2023 respectively from Rittenhouse. These are pretty pure screenshot cards, with 3 cards per episode in both sets. These are all pretty nicely printed and produced cards, if a little basic in overall design, but that's okay at the end of the day. The backs contain a further screenshot and a short snippet of a synopsis of the episode in question. Once again, the autograph cards are the main draw here. I don't have any myself, but as previously stated, they just don't interest me all that much anyway. My TikTok randomly decided to push pack openings of these a while ago, and the big thing in every clip was, are we going to get an autograph card? It's just a shame with these kinds of cards that the base deck themselves seem so uninteresting that the rare autograph cards end up being the only thing bringing people in. Overall, I just don't care for screenshot cards. Despite how nicely produced these cards are, they're just not doing anything for me, and have little to offer that isn't just in the episodes themselves. I wish these did something for me, and more power to you if they do, but I don't know, I just want a little bit more artistry at play. Before we wrap this up, with the most recent release on this list, I'd like to briefly mention a couple of miscellaneous things that I just don't really have that much to talk about. First up, there are these 3 sets of Doctor Who playing cards by Carter Mundi, which are just playing cards with Doctor Who screenshots. These are pretty nice, they're playing cards, there's a set for each of series 1 to 3. That's all there is to say. Second, Cubicle 7 released Doctor Who the card game in 2012. This was a late find in this video making process, I don't really have anything to say about it. There's a Doctor Who variant of the popular card game Flux, released in 2017. I've never played Flux, so there you go. Then, there are 14 different Doctor Who Top Trumps releases over the years, with an additional video game based on the Series 3 set of cards that released on a bunch of consoles in 2008. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. The most recent release on this list comes from this year, 2023, with Magic the Gathering Universes Beyond, a collaboration between Magic the Gathering and Doctor Who, released by Wizards of the Coast. First off, I do not know Magic the Gathering. I've never played it, and any attempt to get me to learn would likely be futile. However, for this video, I did pick up the Capaldi and Whittaker Commander deck, and whilst I do not understand the game itself, these cards are gorgeous. With each card featuring a unique piece of specially drawn art, this brings us back to the pre-screenshot card days, and I love it. A big part of the reason why I even bought these cards, being as disinterested in Magic as I am, is because of this art. It's lovely. However, there is one caveat, and that's the price, because this one deck cost me £50, and that's on the okay end for these. In this deck, you do get 100 cards, with a bunch of other stuff that I do not understand because I don't play Magic. So that's about 50p a card, which is insane to think about when you look at the prices of any other collectible card game. If part of the point of these collaborations is to get outside people into Magic, the high price barrier to entry really hinders that. But then you get to the booster packs, and that's when things get truly fucked, because in that case you're spending £22 for 15 cards. That's £1.46 per card. That's insane. I imagine because of the art, these cards are expensive to get made, but even then, at a lower price point, you'd surely sell more. The price gouging on these things is egregious, and I fed into it by buying these Oh well, at least the art is really nice. Also Dan with his trusty walk. You've gotta love it. And there we have it. We've reached the end of our nearly 60-year odyssey through time and cardstock. It's interesting to look back and compare where we've come from to where we are now. From these small comic panels telling big stories coming free with candy cigarettes and ice lollies, to mass market games released by the biggest card publishers on the planet. And yeah, that tracks, with Doctor Who as a show going from this small series on a minuscule budget to a major franchise co-funded by the biggest media empire on the planet. And of these, I vastly prefer the ones with original art on them, from the gorgeous Richard Jennings art of the original wave to the most recent Magic the Gathering set. There's just something so much more interesting about the way that different artists interpret the show in a form that's legible on such a small piece of card. And then there's the screenshot cards that focus their collectability less on the cards themselves and more on the gimmick cards like autograph cards. Those just don't really do anything for me. Of the card sets, I think that it's the Taifu cards that suffer the most in this regard, with the image choices just not being all that great in my opinion, with the possible exception of this one of Elizabeth Sladen. And then there's the big one, Battles in Time, and honestly, I still think these rule. I think the quality on these is really great, I think the graphic design is really nice and cohesive, it all just really comes together in a nice, neat package. Obviously, I have a lot of nostalgia for these, but even outside of that, these are just great. And it's no small wonder that these have stuck around in the minds of fans because they just work. Unfortunately, I don't think the same can be said for the various attempts to try and recreate the Battles in Time formula, with Alien Armies, Alien Attacks, and Monster Invasion all falling short for me. Overall, I do think this just comes down to the graphic design just feeling a little too crisp and lacking in personality when compared to Battles in Time. Like, it's fine, it's perfectly functional, it just doesn't excite me all that much. As someone whose introduction to Doctor Who was via trading cards, it's been fascinating to go back and see how these cards have developed over the years, as well as how they've tied into the show itself. From the very beginning, with cards that tie very loosely to the show, to ones in the modern day that tie directly to specific stories, often from that year. I really do hope that with the new push from the production team for the upcoming series, we get a new trading card line like Battles in Time that's both high quality and popular enough to bring in new fans to the show like Battles in Time did for me. I can only hope. To the two of you still watching, thank you. And thank you to the various eBay sellers that gave me the ability to satiate my little Doctor Who collector brain. And another big thank you to James, who was gracious enough to give me his time for that interview and whose website was genuinely an invaluable resource in the production of the Battles in Time segment. This has been a mammoth video for me, so I'm gonna go lie down and have a nap. That being said, if anyone wants to trade Battles in Time cards, my spreadsheet with what I have is down in the description. If anyone needs card 436 Fob Watch, please hit me up. I have so many.